I straightened the brass on my dress blues before stepping out of the concrete tunnel, where the drum line's thump shook the air like a heartbeat. Smoke from roasted corn, wet grass, hot paint baking off metal bleachers, it all pushed me half a step back into those old Friday nights when I was just the girl at the end of the stands keeping score for the team. Then the gate clanked open, Ravens Field lit up like a harbor, and a long whistle sailed off the alumni section and cut across my shoulder where the name tape K. Nolan caught the light. Captain Nolan. A young MC called through a handheld mic, eyes flicking down a clipboard. Honor segment's up next. Right this way. He meant well. I smiled, nodded, kept my white gloves steady, and glanced toward the sideline where the band was reforming ranks. Linda Hart intercepted me like an old friend, except the cut glass trophy in her hand flashed the stars on my collar. "Keira, you look amazing," she purred in that sponsor-soft voice. "But this is the soul of tonight." She lifted an alumni jacket, the raven patch shining. "Wear it for the vibe. These lights are sensitive, the uniform will glare on camera." Sponsors hate metallics. I looked at the brass, the seams that had followed me through posts and deserts. "Thank you, but I'm here as an alum and an active duty officer," I said, placing the words down like an ID on a counter. Linda nudged the jacket closer, her perfume mixing with cut grass into a cool, damp cloud. "You don't understand, Keira," she whispered. "This is image politics." I didn't argue. I unzipped my canvas pouch and slid out a signed note. "I'm donating this jacket and the 2 VIP seats to the school's JROTC Scholarship Fund. K. Nolan." Linda blinked, pressed her lips thin, then smiled the way people do when a prop turns into a museum piece in their hands. "Let me take that." A blade-thin voice sliced through. Thomas Nolan, charcoal suit, red tie, stepped into frame between 2 handheld cameras. He folded me into his picture, cologne laying over the grandstand sweat, his palm landing somewhere between my shoulder blade and name tape. "Our mayor's daughter," he said loud enough for the cluster around us. "Tonight's about football, not parade ground rituals." I shifted half a beat, kept his hand from sliding the line of my coat. "I'm here to honor Gold Star families," I said, even. He smiled the smile he keeps for lenses. "Honor, sure, but let me fix your look." His fingers lifted, grazing the edge of my shoulder like a reluctant tailor. It didn't hurt, but the pulse under my collar ticked less fear than an old bruise surfacing those Friday dinners where my worth got tallied in invisible profit margins. "I'm fine." I aimed it at the air, not at him. Logan Pierce slid closer, clean half-step, like a fresh crease, eyes sweeping cameras, security, the band, the Jarda kids craning for a view. "Ma'am, are you okay?" Logan asked. Quiet enough not to break the stadium's rhythm, and clear enough to set the marker. I nodded. We'd promised each other we weren't letting anyone reset our compass tonight. Linda edged back, watching the wind between me and Thomas. A local reporter lunged in with a mic, afraid to miss it. "Mr. Mayor, how do you?" The question snagged as Thomas patted the cloth under my epaulette, the kind of party pat that means nothing anywhere else, but on an active duty uniform, it's a paper-thin cut. "Ma'am," Logan said again, eyes on Thomas's hand now, "do you require medical assistance?" I met his gaze. We knew the drill like we knew the Ravens route tree. If I was uncomfortable, if there was unwanted contact with a uniform on duty, we would call it what it was. No shouting. No theater. Just what the posters on the orderly room wall trained into us. I breathed in and the faint metal sent off the brass ran down into my chest. "I don't need medical," I said, "but I don't consent to anyone fixing my uniform." Logan gave the smallest nod and pivoted half a body, a soft boundary between me and the mayor, just enough to remind everyone there was one. Security looked at each other. They knew who he was. They knew where paychecks came from. One guard tugged an earpiece, stopped stuck between 2 maps. Up top, the band started a warm-up phrase and clipped it off like a gust cut the note. Thomas seized the beat. "Come on," he grinned for the lens, "let Dad make it quick." His fingers came again, faster this time, sliding under the name tape. A camera pushed in. I caught myself warped in the reporter's lenses, his hand like a binder clip trying to pin me to the town's bulletin board. I lifted my chin, kept my back straight, recited for myself. A barracks lesson: pain is temporary, paperwork is forever, honor doesn't bargain. Everyone rise for the next segment, the MC read from script. But another voice lower, like a streetlight planted in concrete, moved across the crowd, slipped into the PA like a slow tide. It didn't shout. It didn't need to. "All rise," the woman said, each word set like a stone. A short beat. Attention. It rolled over the bleachers like a change of season. Veteran backs straightened. The JROTC kids stopped jostling, brushed snack crumbs from the seats, heels pivoting clean and set. Coach Darnell's hand found his heart. The horns dropped their bells by reflex, a half note left hanging like a sentence without a period. Logan came to attention, eyes on the section where the voice originated. I knew the posture. It's the one you take when the boundary line blurs and you choose your person anyway. Thomas's hand hung there, then fell to his side, an extra limb that didn't know its mark. The floodlight split his face in two: half the dad who taught me to tie my shoes on the steps, half the mayor lost inside a ritual he couldn't stage manage. The PA went quiet and let the silence do the rest. "Captain Nolan, proceed to midfield." The MC's tone reset like someone swapped the map. I heard the raven patch rustle in Linda's grip, the reporter's pen click, my own breathing tick like a metronome. I stepped a half pace, the brass cooling on my skin, and knew from the moment attention hit the grass, this night wasn't for photographs. It was a night for redrawing lines. At the edge of my sight line, a silver-haired woman's spine like a flag pole tapped two fingers to a staffer's headset and gave the slightest nod. I didn't know her name yet, but my body knew the language of command. That nod moved the whole stand the way a conductor's hand moves a section. I tightened my gloved fist, took another half step, and felt the invisible cord from the post to this field draw tight, warm, steady, unbreakable. I didn't look back at my father. I looked to midfield at the old white paint over green, and decided that whoever held the mic, I would call things by their right names. I can still hear my father's ballpoint skimming the leather-bound ledger, clean, dry, decisive, like a knife on a cutting board. Every Friday night, when the stadium lights dimmed and we kicked off our shoes on the porch, he'd pull that book into the center of the table. Other families had photo albums. We had the mayor's ledger. He'd open to a fresh page and draw 2 columns: value and marketable. Underneath, each kid's name like line items in a city budget. My brother, partial football scholarship, earned 2 neat plus signs. Me, academic team, library volunteer, Jartete helper, got a blank circle around my name. Then he laid the pen across it like he was sealing the lid on an empty box. "Not everything needs to be sold," my mother said the first time, eyes on the carving knife she wouldn't quite reach for. Dad looked up with that city council smile. "Everything has an audience. You just have to tell the story right." He said we, but he meant I. In our house, the story always required a single narrator, and he never planned to hand over the mic. One homecoming, rain chewed the field and the Ravens lost by a last-second kick. I got home early, reheated chili on the stove. Dad came in with perfect glassy raindrops on his suit, opened the ledger, and peered over his glasses. "What do you have for me tonight?" I told him I coached the new JOTCE kids in the hallway how to hold a flag without shaking, how to breathe from your ribs. He nodded like he was listening to a market report. "And how," he said, "does that help this family?" I wanted to say it helps me sleep. It keeps me from dissolving when the town drums and I don't score on your board. I only shrugged. We both knew numbers were the only answers that counted. Thanksgiving, my senior year, I brought home a county certificate for volunteer service. Mom set it on the mantel between the family photo and a porcelain deer. "The blue brightens the room," she said. Dad stepped past me to rotate the turkey, and when I came back with cranberry sauce, he'd moved the certificate down a shelf. "Volunteering's nice," he said, "but donors don't fund the invisible." That night, after the guests left, I watched him open the ledger and draw a thin line through my name. Not a minus, a rule, a reminder still there, no gain, no loss. On other Fridays, I'd watch Loganton Pierce #12 back then throw the ball like he was throwing a promise. People chanted his name. Mine traveled in a softer register up the metal rows. Keira, "Can you take a picture for the club?" I took the photo. I capped the lens. I collected the small JROTC flags that had fallen out of a freshman's backpack, handed them back, and showed him how to fold so the white stars didn't crease. "Yes, ma'am," he whispered. That ma'am landed in me like a little anchor. One Wednesday, Coach Darnell texted me to come early. He handed me a scuffed plastic badge, equipment room access, and grinned. "You keep this place straighter than any kid I've got." The room smelled like tape, sweat, and rubber. I stacked footballs, sorted bolts, labeled bins in clean slanted print. Maybe that was the first list I controlled, no one behind me asking, "Can this be sold?" Late that night, I ducked into the JROTC room. The neon spat and hummed. The metal lockers felt like the skeleton of an old animal. The instructor took a phone call and left me with the freshmen. One kid with glasses too big for his face fumbled the flag, hands shaking. I told him about a cord I imagine heel to crown taut but painless, so you can stand straight without locking your knees. He tried it. He settled. The eyes behind the lenses stopped swimming. I had nothing to enter in the family ledger for that moment. I knew it had value anyway. When I decided to join the army, I didn't say it over dinner. I said it in the garage, where the paint still smelled new and the lawn mower slept like an old dog. "I'm enlisting this summer," I said. Dad set down the toolbox, metal kissed concrete. "Good," he said, "if you need a cover story for not getting into the schools you wanted." The sentence dimmed the garage like someone slowly turned the neon down. I opened the side door to let in the night air and walked out into a sky so Texas blue it was almost rude. The last night before I left town, Mom stood with me in the living room and stared at the certificate he'd pushed to the lower shelf. She lifted it back where she'd put it. "You're not a line item," she said softly, as if words could break. I nodded. I didn't cry. I tucked the tears somewhere deep, where one day an attention would find them quickly, on post. The first new measuring stick didn't come from Dad or the drill sergeant. It was paperwork. I learned the boxes and the block caps, how a careful report could keep someone from getting chewed up by a big machine. I remember a poster in the admin hallway, bold font, "Tidy paperwork saves messy lives." I smiled because somewhere my father would love that. Sounds like a campaign slogan. To me, it was a compass. It said there's a world where fairness can be carved in clear sentences, where you stand straight not because someone signs your check, but because you promised yourself you would. After that, I stopped bringing my papers home. I stopped performing. I started writing memos for my own future. What I did. Cadets I'd return to mentor. The nights I stood watch under a sky like ink. I taped them inside my suitcase lid like a secret ledger. No marketable column. Just done and why. The why column always ran longer. On leave, I still walked to the Ravens' fence line. The white hash marks cut the field into rational squares. The drumline beat drifted up. The crowd called someone else's name, and I felt fine. Not because I didn't want my name called, but because I chose where it would live on my ID, on a small plaque in the JROTC room, alumni volunteer, and somewhere between those light poles, where no one could reach and fix it. Years rolled. Dad kept winning elections and opening the ledger after every season. I stopped sitting down on time. I stopped waiting for "What do you have for me tonight?" I mailed him a postcard from the desert, 4 words in block caps, "I'm still standing." It came back stamped "refused." I nested it inside my suitcase lid with the memos and closed the latch. Some letters do their job without finding a reader. When Principal Reed emailed to invite me back for homecoming as an honored alum, I stared at the screen one beat longer. I didn't picture a red carpet or a mic. I pictured the JOTC lockers, the kid with the glasses and the imaginary cord, my mother rearranging the mantle in the quiet, no speeches, no justifications, just moving something to where it belongs. I hit accept. Not to prove anything to anyone else, but to answer a question I'd written years ago in my private ledger under why, because where I stand started here, and someone younger needs a place to put their heels down. Tonight, when Thomas's hand lifted toward my shoulder, the old sounds flooded back, lines scratched through names, pages flipping, a certificate slid from a shelf. Over all of it, a A different sound, the attention that used to live only in my head, was now traveling across a real field. I realized I'd come to the right place to write a new line. Not in his ledger. In mine. The bus rolled through the gate and the post swallowed us, then spit us out like fresh rivets from a mold. The wind smelled like chalked drill fields, gun oil, and old shop rags. Drill Sergeant Alvarez paced our line, eyes never landing on anyone. Long his gaze swept like a lighthouse beam looking for the timid. "Who do you think you are in here?" The question hit the brass on my coat and bounced. I knew who I was, a girl who'd been scored with someone else's ruler, and I had come to change rulers. The first week was an ice bath. Run until your thoughts turn into one word: keep. Push-ups until your arms tremble and your pride learns to breathe. Break down a weapon without breaking eye contact. Hear a command inside the noise. Tie your laces so the knot won't betray you when the mud grabs your ankles. Alvarez didn't flatter and didn't bark more than necessary. He corrected us with reality taps. Officers and MPs don't guess. You process facts. I wrote that in a pocket notebook, the kind no one gets to open but me. At Fort Leonard Wood, the heat crawled up through the concrete like a big cat. We built checkpoints. Rehearsed what to do when a car refused to stop, practiced speaking loud enough to carry authority without tiptoeing into threat. I liked laying out lanes, measuring camera angles, planting reflectors so the distance between sign and fence made a perfect funnel. Parameters back home, they were bragging tools. Here they saved people's lives. After the range, Alvarez sometimes stopped beside me with a thick stack of paper. Nolan, he'd tap the stack with 2 knuckles. This is the soul of MP work. Forms. Blank boxes waiting to be filled with facts. He didn't tell war stories. He told the story of a private who didn't get steamrolled because a statement had been written right. Somewhere in my head, my father's ballpoint finally clicked to silent. My first ride-along on patrol looked like wet velvet overhead, streetlights dragging long on damp asphalt. I rode shotgun, back glued to the seat, radio coughing numbers and tones. We pulled a weaving sedan at the side gate. The driver turned out to be a cousin of an old classmate. Sweat on his face, liquor on his breath. He squinted through the glass like I was the neighbor girl with a casserole. I heard my partner's boots round the bumper and the whisper of a rain jacket. "Sir, kill the engine, hands on the wheel." My voice stayed even. I wasn't searching for an old face. I was searching for the procedure. "Come on, we know each other," he said, sprinkling local names like candy in front of a kid. "The mayor will," the rest clinked to the floorboard like an empty bottle. Inside me, the high schooler stood between 2 shelves, one labeled favors, one labeled principles. I chose the second. We ran the test and wrote the report. When I signed at the bottom, my hand didn't shake. My partner glanced over. "Good call," he said under his breath. Alvarez keyed up on the radio. I answered clean and round, like a smooth stone dropped in water. After the handoff, I sat alone in the report room a few extra minutes, listening to the clock grind the hour. I wrote everything: the sway of the car, the wrong hand placement, the smell, the comment about a relative's office. Not more, not less. I didn't write the mayor's name. I wrote an implied office holder. Paper welcomed ink, the way wet sand holds a footprint clear until the wind comes. I wanted my lines to be the kind that set hard. The next day, a once friend texted, "Heard you went too far." I typed back, "I went exactly far enough." The thread died. I put the phone away and laughed, not happy, but like someone who discovers she's been carrying a compass all along. Some nights Alvarez played us an old recording of a talk by Major General Elaine Brooks. No theatrics in her voice, just the timbre of someone used to choosing inside static. "If you can't defend it with words," she said, "you can't defend it with handcuffs." My spine straightened by reflex. Her name pinned itself to the map of my life in a far corner. The string hadn't reached yet. I didn't know she'd one day step into my story on a football field. I only knew from that day on I wrote reports like vows. On the tired days, I drilled one-on-one with my reflection: how to open a stop, where to stand so the angles favor you, how to flag a partner if you see a blade in the door pocket. I learned a strange thing: the less I said, the more I was heard. I measured distances by 10 paces to the hash mark, 2 full breaths before the next directive. I counted like I used to count on Fridays, only now the players were risk variables. Some nights we slogged back with Missouri mud caked to our boots. I hung my kit, wiped the brass with a damp cloth until it cooled bright again. Inside the locker I taped a scrap of paper. Not everything can be sold. But everything must be right, not a poster slogan mine. I fell asleep with radio hiss still in my ears and dreamed of a wide room of wooden tables, each with someone writing a report while I walked the aisle checking boxes, nodding or moving a period. It would sound ridiculous to most people. To me it felt like posting guard at my own front gate. Letters from home came spotty. Mom wrote about peaches on the tree. She didn't mention my father. But you could read the doorway between the lines. Once she sent a picture of the school's gold star wall. I printed it and taped it inside the locker. Every time I slung my holster, I looked at that picture and remembered why precision wasn't optional. I would not let a stray comma in my paperwork open a hole in someone's life. At the end of our training cycle, Alvarez handed each of us a 1-sheet eval. Mine Nolan by the book, no seasoning. Keep it that way. I laughed at the desert dry phrasing and folded it into my wallet. No seasoning means no drama. No drama means fewer mistakes. Fewer mistakes means someone gets home. The last night before I left Leonard Wood, I walked the fence line. The woods on the far side were half asleep. Metal ticked somewhere in the dark. I touched the brass on my coat. It felt cool, like a pocket moon. I thought of Red Ridge, of the field, of my father's ledger, and realized I'd stopped needing anyone to tally for me. I had a new metric, the space between right and easy. Every time I picked right, I heard a tiny click like a nail fixing another corner of my life to its frame. Tomorrow I'd grab leave, then a deployment. But first I was stopping by the Gyre OC room at my old school. I wanted to hand the kids what the Army had handed me, a way to stand straight without anyone's fingers fixing you. I didn't know homecoming would demand every ounce of what I'd learned, every word in a statement, every breath count, every chin lift. My body already knew, the way your feet still find a painted line, even with your eyes half closed. The sandstorm came like someone slamming a giant door. Noon went dim, grit slipped through window seals and down my collar, turning my mouth into a little bowl of dust. Our convoy drifted to the shoulder and set the book formation: lead, middle, trail, each gap wide enough for a mistake and, if we were lucky, a correction. I pulled my scarf tight and kept scanning concrete rooftops along the route. My finger brushed the reflector I'd measured that afternoon. The parameters I prayed in a low voice held: 15-degree angle, face 1 boot off the ground, internal net hot but not stacked. Somewhere inside the wind, I heard Alvarez's ghost MPs protect with facts and space. Inside the truck, a buddy cracked a bottle of water that tasted like it had come straight off a kettle. In the rear view I caught a new kid's eyes, 2 beads of sweat rolling down a forehead, and gave him a nod. He nodded back. We didn't need words. When the storm passed and the sun dropped like a hot coin into our palms, we rolled again. On the radio the company cleared the route and pushed us to the next checkpoint. The world creaked forward like a gate coming unstuck. That night, sand at the foot of my bunk made the sheets rasp. I wrote a report longer than minimums, filled every box, added a note on a blind spot where we'd set a screen next time. I finished with a small line the way I always did: note to self, don't let the storm scramble your voice. I taped it inside my locker next to the Gold Star wall, photo Mom had mailed. The DFAC was always loud, and the food was so same that even homesickness tasted like black pepper. One night I met Logan Pierce at the coffee line. Ball cap, soft t-shirt, shoulders wider than the quarterback I remembered. On his tray 2 blacks and a protein bar. "Captain Nolan," he said, like the name needed trying on again. I smiled. Staff Sergeant Pierce. We hovered a beat in the clatter of utensils, something that didn't belong to our old town, and something that absolutely did. Texas edges cut by years under Friday night lights. We sat. The coffee warmed my hands like an invitation to talk. Logan said he was attached to our post for a bit to run joint drills. Tomorrow he'd field with MPs. I told him about our sandstorm day. He nodded, eyes creasing with that line I've only seen on people who've stared at the horizon longer than is comfortable. In the gym, he still threw like he was 17 easy wrist, clean parabola, catches that landed like a memory built to last. I counted rope jump beats. He counted reps. Between numbers, we filled the gap with Small Life, the taco truck, by the North Gate, my JOTC chid who'd gotten into a state school, the purple bruise along his neck from a sloppy rope climb. I didn't mention my father. I wasn't pouring grit into a clean cup. A few days later, a postcard I'd mailed came back refused. The purple stamp sat on my wrist like cold stone. I set it on the table, looked at my block letters, Ait Techum still standing, and the old storm, not the desert one, crossed my eyes. Logan stood there, quiet the way folks get when they're picking the right word. Then keep standing, he said. Let the bleachers decide the rest. I exhaled. First time I'd heard someone use bleachers the right way without football in the sentence. That night we ran the perimeter by the flight line, runway lights pulsing, and my words hit the ground lighter. On MP Ranger Integration Day, we built a mock checkpoint, his guys under the low roof, mine working the ground. I drafted a basic hand signal board. He tucked a few motions tighter. He didn't grab the reins. He filled the space I left. Afterward, the company said the magic words by the book, on time, in order. No one said beautiful. I didn't need them to. Right has its own beauty, the kind cameras never quite nail. Next lunch, an email pinged. Principal Red inviting me back to Red Ridge homecoming as an honored alum in uniform. I opened it and folded it in my head 3 times the way Mom folds cloth napkins. Logan eyed the screen and smirked. Friday night lights? Yeah. Back in, straight down the middle? Yeah. We didn't romanticize it. We planned it like a mission leave request, flights, emergency contacts to the unit. Logan joked he'd bring his old #12 for kids to sign. I told him they only needed him to stand at the right time. The night before we flew, a strange cool breeze showed up. In the women's bay, I pulled my dress blues from the locker and checked every seam, every button, every loop like I was touching a promise. I slid the returned postcard into the inside pocket, ran a thumb over my own letters still standing, and felt something unweight in my chest. Maybe it was the simple admission that some doors won't open, and prying them isn't my job. We sat outside and mapped Red Ridge like a terrain model. He marked the left side section where the vets always sit. I traced the indoor hall where the gold star wall glows warm behind cold glass. We set one small rule. If I felt the wind shift, Logan would move a half step, not to speak for me, just to make sure I wasn't eating the gust alone. He tapped his thumb on the picnic table like he was setting a tiny nail in that agreement. I typed Mom a short note. Homecoming. I'll be there. I deleted the next sentence. I'll stop by the house, left the first, hit send. I didn't know if she'd moved my volunteer certificate back up a shelf. I knew she'd set out my favorite mug. I also knew my father would count camera angles and lines useful to him. This time I was bringing the one thing he couldn't measure, a quiet community, and a command that doesn't need a microphone, the command I give myself. At first light we headed to the flight line. Wind pulled sand into ribbons, the rotors blurred. I thought about the white paint on the field, about the kid with the big glasses I taught to stand straight, about attention, a word that used to live only in my head, maybe ringing where I was born. I boarded with my blues and the postcard in my grip, heart steady as the wood table back in the JROTC room. If anyone asked why I was going home, I'd say, because Red Ridge has a hash mark waiting for my heels, and this time, I'm not stepping around it. I got to Ravens Field early just to stand in the hallway with the gold star wall. The glass was cold, the lights were warm, and the names lay quiet like gold thread stitched into black cloth. I pressed my palm there for one beat, like touching the shoulder of someone who'd already gone. Logan waited by the door, hands in his pockets, eyes tilted toward the turf where the cheer squad was polishing a final routine. He knew I needed a few silent minutes. When I turned back, we followed the concrete path toward hospitality, where the boosters had set up their kingdom. Linda Hart spotted me from a distance and waved like she was calling a model onto a carpet. A silver apt box sat center table, ribbon big as a butterfly. Keira, perfect timing. Tomorrow night during the honor segment, wear this. She lifted an alumni jacket with a fat raven patch. 2 VIP seats come with it right next to the donor. The press will eat it up. She laid the jacket across my arm like testing weight. Dress blues photograph harsh. The new lights blow out the metallics. Our donor prefers a more community-friendly image. You understand. I looked up at the stadium rigs and felt that familiar drum of the field in my chest. I knew exactly what I had to do. Thank you, but I already have tomorrow night's attire, I said, keeping it gentle. Linda smiled bleacher-white teeth. Don't be stubborn, Keira. This is homecoming, not a military parade. Logan shifted half a step, rested a hand on the table's edge quiet as a hidden latch. I pulled a folded note from my pocket, a donation slip moving the jacket and both VIP seats to the JROTC Scholarship Fund. I want the kids to make summer training. If possible, listed anonymous. Linda pressed her lips, the look people have when a sure win blinks out on the last move. She tried once more. Then how about a slot on the field? Donors love a signature story. If I speak, I said, I'll talk about the names in there. I nodded toward the glass. They don't need an audience. They need cadets who know how to stand. My phone buzzed. Thomas Nolan, don't embarrass the family tomorrow. No hello, no how are you? I put the phone away. Logan glanced over and didn't ask the way a man hears a pencil strike an old ledger in another room. BBQ tonight? He said. BBQ, I said. Coach Darnell's backyard smelled like ribs and foil-wrapped corn. The flag under the eave flapped loose. Folding chairs made a circle. A cooler sweated ice in the middle. A few vets came early with potato salad and a bakery box of peach hand pies. They shook my hand like men who don't make you prove anything. Welcome home, Captain, one said, voice like an old AM radio. Good to be here, sir, I answered, and felt my heart slot into place like a ladder finding its rung. Coach handed me the tongs. You flip these better than I do. I laughed. Smoke stung my eyes and warmed the rest of me. The JROTC kids clustered near the grass. The big glasses freshman from back when now taller than me, told me he'd won a small stipend for drill shoes, eyes bright like a new bulb. I gave him the jacket I'd just donated. Long walk, wear it for warmth. And remember it came from the whole crew, not a name. He hugged it, brand new cloth smelling like a promise, nodded solemnly the way kids do when they feel a weight that isn't heavy. A vet told the story about the year the Ravens lost by a whisper and won it back on a crazy onside kick. Cans clinked, the circle laughed. Logan's knee touched mine. Some families don't need ledgers to know who belongs. They need a circle, a fire, and a story told right on time. Crickets sang behind the fence, oaks rubbed their leaves together. An old metal hinge whistled under the gate. I thought if the wind picks up tomorrow, I won't blow over. Near the end, Coach pulled me under the porch light and handed me an old photo, the gold star wall the day it went up. If you get a mic tomorrow, he said, remind the kids the names on that glass used to sit in these chairs. I nodded, the photo fluttering like a small flag in my hands. Logan was across the yard, showing the cadets how to fold the colors without creasing a star. His hands were slow and sure. Every kid who got it right earned his quiet good. If tomorrow asked for it, I knew all he had to do was add a half step. When the crowd thinned, I rinsed my hands under the backyard spigot. Cold water slapped my skin and dragged me back into the now. The phone buzzed again. Mom, this time sleep early. Tomorrow will be windy. She didn't say which kind. I knew both. I texted back a little flag and shut it down. Driving home, we passed Ravens Field. The lights were out parking lot. Sodium swept orange stripes over the white hash marks. I stopped at the fence and looked into the bowl like studying a map. I traced tomorrow's path in my head tunnel, sideline, midfield. I pictured faces, mics, careless fingers reaching to fix what didn't belong to them. In my head a short, clear syllable rose from the barracks and took its seat again, attention. Not to scare anyone. To remind me, every boundary begins with one person willing to name it. Back home I hung my dress blues, checked seams and buttons one more time. I slid the returned postcard into the inside pocket and touched the words I to Chem, still standing like pressing a seal. Logan's text lit up tomorrow, half a pace. I answered tomorrow, the right place. I killed the lights. Night laid over the room like a thin blanket. Somewhere in the living room, my father's ledger probably sat open like every other Friday. I didn't need to see it to know what he'd write. I only knew that tomorrow, in front of the whole town, I'd open my book and write a line in my own voice. Out beyond the trees, the wind moved and carried the smell of fresh-cut grass. I closed my eyes and let the drum line in my memory count the beats. In the half-sleep before morning, a concrete tunnel opened, stadium lights spilled down, and a low woman's voice traveled the PA, "All rise." I took one step. Logan took a half step. And for the first time in years, Red Ridge held still. Out of the tunnel's dark, the field opened like the mouth of a big river. The band formed up. The drumline tapped 3 tight beats and went still, as if waiting for a command nobody had said yet. I brushed the brass on my coat, not a check, a reminder of which capacity I was here in. Alumni roared to my right. The family section murmured the mayor's name to my left. I heard the MC start his script, now honoring alumni in military service, and his voice dissolved into the crowd noise. Thomas Nolan stepped between me and the light, smile honed like a knife every election season. "Let Dad walk you to midfield," he said, and without waiting, set his hand on my shoulder right where my name tape sat. That soft, stagey fix might be nothing at a banquet. On an active duty uniform, it was a pen stroke on a map that didn't belong to him. "Ma'am, are you okay?" Logan murmured at my left shoulder. I nodded, but Thomas's hand climbed a notch, like the camera hadn't found focus yet. I angled my body, kept the distance. "Mr. Mayor," I said, keeping my tone neutral, "I can walk myself." He smiled, big enough for the front rows. "Honey, this is home turf. Let me fix it for the cameras." His fingers slid under the name tape, just beneath the epaulette. A security kid flinched a half step, eyes bouncing from my ID to the seal on the mayor's lapel. "Nolan," Logan said my name, but the question was aimed at procedure, not feelings. "Ma'am, do you require medical assistance?" Clear, measured, establishing the record if I confirmed discomfort from unwanted contact on a uniform on duty. The brass felt cool and straightened my spine. "No medical," I said, "but I do not consent to anyone touching my uniform." Logan dipped a tiny nod and pivoted a half body, a soft boundary between me and Thomas, exactly the half step we'd agreed on. A camera nosed in. A reporter lifted her mic. "Mr. Mayor, how do you?" The question snagged when Thomas flashed his second smile, the one he uses when a vote's about to pass, and gave my shoulder seam another little tug, like proving who framed the picture. A small O rippled from a pocket of seats. Up high, a few veterans stiffened, shoulders settling into the old reflex. "I'll file if necessary," Logan told the nearest guard, calm as a checklist. "We've got unpermitted contact with a commissioned officer in uniform." The guard swallowed. His shoulder radio jumped and went quiet. For one heartbeat, I saw everything at once. My father's ledger open on the kitchen table, the gold star wall under warm lights. The jacket I'd donated, the invisible rib cage of a town deciding which way to lean. Then her voice, low, steady, rolled out. "All rise." The stadium PA dropped a curtain. The noise fell beneath the level of the order. A beat, attention. No flourish, no drum roll, just a word falling square. The scene flipped like a switch. Veterans stood in rows, backs like columns. JROT kids stopped jostling, opened their ranks, heels pivoted and set, eyes front. Coach Darnell's hand found his heart. The horns dipped their bells by pure muscle memory, a half note hanging like a single thread. Linda Hart held her breath, still clutching a hollow jacket. The guard near me rolled his shoulders, as if a paragraph from the security SOP had just lit up in his head, respect and on-site authority. I turned, eyes searching for the source. Mid-tier bleachers, silver hair pinned neat, spine like a flagpole, 2 fingers to a staffer's headset, the smallest hand signal. Major General Elaine Brooks. I knew her before the MC could say it. The body language was the class I'd learned by heart. Command presence doesn't need larger insignia. It needs the right second and the right sentence. Thomas jerked his hand back like he'd brushed a sharp edge. I didn't look at him. I watched the bleachers change color from football chaos to the quiet of discipline. Quiet isn't empty, it's the place where people decide to stand. Logan eased his hand, settled to a tension behind me, gentle as a plumb line. I could hear my own breathing and measure heel to hash mark, enough room not to step out of bounds. "Captain Nolan, please proceed to midfield," the MC said, voice suddenly fresh, batteries clear. I took a step. The vet's eyes tracked me by reflex, a few gave micro nods. Each nod was a little nail biting into the loose wood of the night. I passed Linda. "Keira," she whispered, half plea, half warning. I didn't stop. I've aged out of pausing to explain why I stand up straight. At midfield, the turf felt like a blank page. I took the mic. "Good evening, Red Ridge," I said, no hunt for a voice. It was already there. "Before we call the Ravens names, I want to call another team. The families whose names live on the glass down that hallway. No long story, just 3 lines like hash marks: a friend's older brother, a medic who walks slower now, a dad working nights so his kid can wear a JOTKC cord." The bleachers breathed with me. No cans clacked, no laughter cut across. At the edge of my sight, Major General Brooks dipped a nod, face of someone ticking a checklist complete. Handing back the mic, I turned to the guard who'd wavered. "You good?" I asked low. He nodded, face red. Logan stepped up just enough to slip a small card, the base security review line, into his hand. "If you ever want a second set of eyes on a report, call." "Yes, sir," the kid blurted, then remembered Logan wasn't an officer and got redder. We smiled and let it be. Thomas stood at the sideline like a man who'd missed his train. The cameras weren't magnetized to him anymore. They drifted to the frame of me shaking Brooks's hand. She said, almost private, "Captain, you kept your bearing." "Ma'am, thank you for setting the tone," I answered. Her eyes flicked across my brass like checking for scuffs. A slogan from the admin hallway flashed in my head: "Paperwork saves messy lives." Tonight a single order, on time, saved a town from turning a violation into a show. The lights swept and a tide of ravens came back from the stands. I saw Linda close the jacket box, ready the bow, then ease out of the center seam of the evening. Coach lifted a thumbs up I wished I could pocket. The JROT's kids stood so straight, their shirts pulled tight, eyes wet, mouths set. The script resumed. Kickoff loomed. Logan tipped his head toward the sideline, his half-step evaporating because it wasn't needed anymore. My shoulders settled, shoulder blades dropping into place. Above us the flag barely stirred. Somewhere deep inside I wrote a line in that private ledger. Tonight, the boundary was named. And when the whistle blew to start the game, I felt Red Ridge, at least for this stretch, holding still in the right stance. The opening whistle snapped the crowd back to football, but the air on the field felt different, like someone had replaced all the light without changing into a single bulb. Hits sounded sharper, cheers carried farther, and under the rolling Ravens. Ravens! I walked the sideline. Mike returned. My chest light the way it gets after you drop a rucksack. Logan matched my stride. The half-step disappeared, replaced by a shared cadence, 2 clock hands finally on the same spindle. I didn't look up toward where Thomas was standing. I didn't need to. The lenses had slipped off him like water draining from a shallow puddle. A local TV reporter jogged beside me, handheld mic quivering in the wind. "Captain Nolan," she asked. How did it feel to hear attention ring across the stadium? I thought of the glass wall, the cool tang of brass, the faces that had stood to and didn't owe anyone an explanation. "I think we all know when it's time to stand straight," I said. "Tonight we just reminded each other." She nodded, eyes softening like someone relieved to set the mic down. Up in VIP, Principal Reed shuffled down the steps with a donor envelope clutched in both hands. He glanced around, then headed straight for me like a man deciding on a different road after years of the same one. "Captain, the donor would like a word." He gestured to a man in a velvet sports coat with a small silver pin. The man offered his hand. Caleb Hartman, that was clear. He looked directly into my eyes when he said clear, as if testing whether I was afraid of it. I wasn't. He tugged Reed a touch closer and spoke low for the 3 of us. "This year's budget we're moving a portion to the schools. Jertesh Scholarship Fund, per your suggestion. No plaque with my name. But we'll need clean stewardship." He flicked a glance at Logan. I'm guessing you've got someone who can make the paperwork sing. Logan smiled thin. Yes, sir. I nodded and caught Linda half a pace away, wearing the face of someone mid-script change who can't find the new page yet. Coach Darnell swung by from the sideline, sweat purling under his cap brim. That was he stopped, corrected himself. Precision. He gripped my hand like tightening a bolt one last fraction of a turn. If the kids win tonight, it's because the field changed color. I almost said that even if they lost, a different part of us had already won. I didn't have to. He knew. In the student section, the Garoti kids held a row back straight like a taut cord. The former big glasses freshman, now nearly Logan's height, flashed me an awkward V, then dropped it fast, remembering he was at attention. I laughed under my breath and gave them a micro-nod, the unspoken ritual between people who share a language without words. It rippled through the line, smiles broke without teeth, contained like a boundary drawn with a fine pen. Major General Brooks arrived with no entourage. She moved through the crowd the way a longitude line cuts a map, no one scattering, no one clustering. Captain, she said, voice like a freshly honed blade, bright, not flashy. Know what I liked best about tonight? I waited. You didn't yell. You didn't perform. You placed the sentence where it belonged and let the community answer. I straightened a hair without meaning to. Her eyes flicked toward Thomas at a distance. Her face didn't change, but the message was clear. Don't let him take up space in your sentence. Tomorrow, she added, my office will endow a small program to teach document skills to your cadets. If you accept, you own the curriculum. I want them to learn early that words are protective gear. The yes, ma'am came out of me on reflex. On the field, the Ravens sliced left with a cross run drawn like a ruler line. The stadium cracked, a swell rolling like a wave against a hull. I glanced at Thomas in the family block. He was talking hard at Linda, hands moving quick, but no camera cared. The lights spotted his lapels in mottled patches. Maybe for the first time, he was learning what it felt like to live outside the frame, a feeling I grew up inside. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt settled, like setting the pen down after finishing a clean report. Mid-quarter, the PA slid in soft music and Principal Reed waved me to a small riser by the student section to say a word to the kids. The mic was cool. Who here has ever felt like a back row person? I asked. A scatter of shy hands went up. Good, I said. Tonight the back row stood the whole place at attention. I told them about the jacket becoming a scholarship, no names given. I talked about the Gold Star Wall as a book that never runs out of chapters. I reminded them of the invisible cord from heel to crown. When someone tells you to take off the shiny metal so the camera won't glare, I paused, looked them square, asked if the glare is the metal or the truth. The bleachers hummed, went still, then rolled into a long, low applause, the kind that clings to steps like rain clings to leaves. Back on the steps, Linda stopped me. Her expression shifted from sparkle to steady. Keira, she said, I meet with the donor in the morning. I think we should create a permanent JROTIG line item. We can tuck the logo at the bottom. She looked up at the flag and breathed out, like conceding that some things don't belong on a glossy leaderboard. Thank you for the adjustment, I said. The word adjustment made us both smile, remembering the other word that had almost turned the night into theater. She nodded the nod of someone reshelving the store in the right order. Logan passed me a water. You good? Good, I said. You? Good enough, he grinned. When the papers start calling, let me handle the checklists. I snorted, already seeing the near future tidy PDFs, clear headers, lean tables of contents, paper that saves messy lives headed for the school. He leaned in, voice at floor level. You don't have to lean into the wind alone anymore. I didn't say thank you. I set my gloved hand on the back of his for 1 second, long enough to sign something quiet. Late in the quarter, Coach jogged back and shoved a laminate into my palm. Sideline access, permanent guest. So nobody asks you for a ticket ever again, he winked. I looked at the little card, a kind of pass, and smiled. The real pass tonight wasn't on plastic. It was a single word that went over the PA and kept echoing in my head: attention. It turned a town into a parade ground for exactly 3 beats, long enough to remind us that where there's honor, there's order. When the second half opened, Thomas slipped out of the family block. No one stopped him. No one sent him off. His taillights drew a skinny red line across the lot and vanished under the trees. I watched a heartbeat, not out of regret, but to close a long file. Mom texted, "You stood beautifully." I laughed. She'd picked beautiful like a woman straightening a picture frame on a shelf level, measured enough. The Ravens punched in another score. The bleachers exhaled like one big chest. Major General Brooks shook my hand once more before leaving, her gaze driving the last nail into the knight's frame. "Keep the bearing, Captain." "Yes, ma'am." The answer set a round stone in my palm, exact weight, perfect fit. The night folded up, the wind eased. Me, Logan, and a knot of cadets watched the last minutes from the rail. When the long-ending whistle blew, there were no pylon hugs. We touched shoulders and nodded like people finishing a long, clean drill. The grass shone with silvered shoe marks. I thought about tomorrow: emails, forms, schedules. A Friday Night Lights story could end with a score. Mine runs an extra chapter: transfer power from optics to principle, from microphone to black and white, from one man to a circle. I laced my fingers with Logan's, not tight. "Let's go," I said. "We've got a mountain of checklists in the morning." He laughed, said the skeletons built. "I just have to fill." "Fine," I said. "But first note at the top, no one touches an active duty uniform." He nodded like he'd known that before we ever re-met. We passed the Gold Star wall one more time. Hall lights pooled on the glass, names steadied there like fixed stars. I put my palm to it, cold, solid. I made myself a promise every homecoming. I'll be back with a new set of cadets, so they know where to put their heels and where to put their words. And if anyone asks what happened tonight, I'll say. Red Ridge stood up, not because of me, but because somebody spoke at the exact moment we already knew what to do. In the lot, headlights bled over asphalt. Overhead, the constellations burned without a soundtrack. I no longer heard a pen crossing out a line in some old ledger. I heard a fresh page turn. The ink wasn't dry yet, but the first line was sharp. The boundary was named, and the community chose the right side of it. Homecoming ended with people spilling into the aisles and a feeling like the town had finally swept the dust off its streets. We didn't chase an after-party. We ducked into the diner where I'd washed dishes the summer after junior year. Black coffee steamed between my hands. Logan traced an invisible line on the formica with his finger, as if sinking one last nail into the night's frame. I texted my mother, "I'll come by later." She sent back a single star. Nothing extra. The next morning we sat in the principal's office. Principal Reed slid a stack across the desk: articles of creation for the JROTCC Scholarship Fund and a Paperwork Saves Lives program at Major General Brooks's suggestion. I read slow, box by box, flagged signature lines, added a clause about transparency and public reporting. Logan built a launch checklist and a timeline for short workshop statements, incident notes, how to write what happened without letting feelings trample facts. "No frills," I said. "Clear," he answered. We worked until sunlight climbed the frosted panes, then stopped by the Gold Star wall on our way out. I pressed my palm to the glass and felt the cold move through my skin. Some cold makes you shrink. This kind makes you stand straighter. My father didn't call. He read a curt email, copied me, about shared hopes for the town's future. No apology. The reply button lit up, then went dark. I deleted it not from anger, but because I had other pages to write: the fund charter, the first donor roll, the fall schedule for classes. People say time heals. I think structure does: straight lines, clean columns, bullet points that respect boundaries. A year passed. On the first Sunday of every month I unlocked the JROTC room, hit the flickering neon, set up the whiteboard, and wrote the course title. From note-taking to shield-making, write it right. Chairs scraped the floor in a steady rhythm. I taught them to capture reality, even when their hands shook: placement, words spoken, contact made, whether observed, how to write short without writing thin, how one precise verb can replace three fuzzy ones. I told them, one day, the black and white you put on paper will stand in the wind for somebody else. Some laughed, some nodded. One asked, "Ma'am, have you ever messed it up?" I said yes. I told them about the time I missed a period, and a teammate spent 30 minutes making it right. The room went quiet. I tapped the board. Fix it before someone pays for it. Sometimes Major General Brooks would slip in and sit the back row. No remarks. After class, she'd walk the line, reading their practice reports, then give me a small note: when you teach them to sign, teach them to read. A living sentence has the right to correct itself before the cover goes on. I wrote it in my own notebook. A living sentence. I liked how she called words the way some people call troops. At home, my mother moved my old volunteer certificate to the top shelf. She didn't say anything, just lifted her chin like, right place. I helped her take down a picture and replaced it with a black and white from the night of attention. Stadium light salted my shoulders. Logan stood half a pace behind me, the bleachers blurred into backdrop. You can't hear the PA in a photograph, but every time I passed it I felt that low wave hit the chest again. Late spring, Coach Darnell called me to the field on a breezy, warm afternoon. On a scarred wood table sat a roll of red cloth. You're presenting this tonight. He unrolled it, the captain's band for the Gyro TC drill unit. The laugh that came up felt like it started deep in my ribs. Pick the recipient, he said. I scanned the line at the far end. Maya, hair in a tight bun, posture like a sharpened pencil, counted time with her eyes instead of her mouth, and kept the rank straight as a ruler. I called her over and handed her the band. Why do you stand straight? I asked. So the people behind me can see the way, she said, clean as a map. I tied it around her sleeve, not too tight, blood needs to move. A captain isn't the loudest voice, I told her. She knows when to be quiet so others can hear their own. The scholarship ceremony took over the multi-purpose room, rows of folding chairs, tissue paper, flowers in old jelly jars. Principal read the donor list. Caleb Hartman sat up front and nodded when I mentioned the recurring commitment. Linda Hart worked the door, checking off names. No silver gift boxes, just a stack of lunch vouchers for parents who'd rushed from extra shifts. Brooks handed out paperwork, saves live certificates, thick stock, crisp ink, names squared away. When Maya came up, I added a slender envelope: summer camp scholarship. Her eyes went wide, then lowered to keep them from spilling. I leaned in. Write everything you see. Leave one line blank for what you don't understand yet. She nodded. I knew that nod. I'd made it once in a base parking lot with no idea which way my life would turn. After the ceremony, we drifted to the Gold Star wall. No one called for silence, it just arrived. I read the names, some shared with people who still sell vegetables at the Saturday market. Honor has a face. It isn't a banner strung between lampposts. I touched the glass, let my print bloom and fade. Beside me, Maya breathed. I'm scared I'm not enough. Everyone is, I said. Start by writing right. Then step right. A few days later, a plain envelope showed up in my mail. Inside, a clipped article about the scholarship night and a small slip of paper: congratulations. TN. The handwriting was so familiar I could hear the pen. I sat still a long time, slid it into the drawer, and didn't answer. Some marks don't belong in a sentence. Sometimes silence is the punctuation. By summer, we ran a field drill. Sun bit the back of my neck, wind flipped the edge of the flag, shoes slapped the concrete in time. Logan stood off to the side with a clipboard, tracking supplies. Now and then he handed water to a kid whose face ran too red, no commentary. When we wrapped, I cut them loose and sat on the low steps. You still remember when to take a half step? I asked. He smirked. Anytime someone thinks about touching your uniform. I laughed. It's instinct now. One slow afternoon, we took the bench that faces Ravens Field. The sky went deep blue. The sideline stripes looked like two underlines under a sentence. I leaned my head on his shoulder and listened to his breathing even out. Ever think we overdid it? I asked, half joking, half not. If we had, the bleachers wouldn't have stood, he said. I didn't argue. I listened to the thin metal whisper of brass when the wind caught my collar, the tap of rope on the flagpole, the town drawing breath, learning again how to stand after one well-timed word. That night my mother called. She'd rearranged a few frames and set a new shelf for the little notebooks cadets keep giving me. You've got too many, she laughed. Each one's a story. Leave room. I promised. I looked up at the black and white in our living room, me at midfield, back straight, eyes on the stands, Logan half a pace behind, Major General Brooks a narrow, steady glow in the far background. I thought of her line, a living sentence has the right to correct itself. I want my life like that, revisable, season by season, as long as I keep my bearing. Before bed I opened the closet and touched my dress blues. Cloth cool, buttons colder, clean soap. From the inside pocket I slid the old postcard, I'm still standing. I put it back and closed the door softly. Out there, people will always measure with spreadsheets. In here, I measure with the things that keep others safe, a true sentence, a right step, a steady hand on a shoulder when it's needed. Tonight, before the lamp clicked off, I wrote one last line in my open notebook. The captain's band found its arm. I underlined captain not for me, but for a girl named Maya and the others who'll read it on a windy day. When they ask why we stand straight, the answer won't be my story anymore. It'll be theirs, and Raven's Fields, and a town that knows attention isn't a threat. It's a promise to hold one another in the line. Outside, the streetlight stuck a yellow square on the sky like a post-it. I closed my eyes and felt everything slide where it belongs. Somewhere so faint it could be a pen settling on a desk, a new chapter began.